Hey everybody, welcome back to Video So today we're continuing the series where I play some of my favorite B-tier beat-em-up games of all time that won't show up on any top 25 best lists. And if you can't tell already, today we're playing Nekketsu Oyako, and I'm not going to try to pronounce that a second time because I hope I got it right the first time. This is one of those games, it's an absolute PlayStation 1 classic, and it is a launch game for the Japanese PlayStation 1. When pretty much everything was going 3D, this game stubbornly maintained its 2D sprites and backgrounds, and it was awesome for it. Before you get too far involved, it'd be a huge favor, go down below, hit like and subscribe, and ring that notification bell, definitely helps us out. And if you feel so inclined to want to support the channel, got a Patreon link down below as well. But there's two reasons I absolutely love this game. The first, it is a 2D PlayStation 1 game, and we didn't get that many of them back in the day, especially at launch. And two, it is absolutely weird. I'm actually starting with level 2 here, because what other game allows you to have a beat 'em up level inside of a killer whale? We're fighting octopi with boxing gloves on, we're fighting these gigantic H2O monsters that just kind of jumble around the screen, turning into other smaller drops of liquid, and we're doing this in a whale's intestinal tract while it undulates in the background. This game just has such a weird sense of humor. But let's move back to the first stage so you know how the game actually opens up. I don't know if these are Foot Clan members from Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, but they definitely have those vibes, and this basically feels like Final Fight meets some sort of Bizarro World game. This definitely seems like a cheap Mike Hagar mixed with Freddie Mercury of Queen in all the best ways possible, and that mustache is definitely working overtime. You will see here that there are weapons in the game that you can pick up. You can get knives, different bazookas, and other grenades that you'll see in just a moment. And of course, it's a beat 'em up, so you definitely have to destroy everything around you to get that bottle of milk to upgrade your health. And I think it is hilarious that it is milk. This is definitely not one of the best beat 'em ups of all time. It's not going to make any top 10 list, but I absolutely love this game. It is a super competent beat 'em up from a company that was way more known for making shmups, and it is a 2D game on a system that was primarily used to show 3D to the world. That is why I love it so much. It has charm, it has flair, it has collectible PlayStation 1 consoles in the game that give you extra points, and it has a super competent beat 'em up engine all wrapped around it. Because this was still the transition phase between 2D and 3D. PlayStation 1 was always developed to be a 3D console, and a lot of the executives in North America were really resistant and hesitant to bring any of these 2D experiences over because it was basically betraying what the marketing was for the PlayStation 1. They did not want to sell us 2D games in an era that was basically inventing 3D as we went, which is an absolute travesty because some of the best PlayStation 1 games of all time, in my opinion, are the 2D games that just use a little bit of 3D here and there. Because as much as the PlayStation was a 3D console, some of my favorite games on the system are in 2D, and I love when it mixes it together. Like right here, as these billboards fall into the screen, those are made out of polygons, and it gives you a little bit of a 3D effect, and I love when they combine 2D and 3D together. And of course, on the last one, I slid a bit too far forward and ended up taking damage. But on the beat 'em up front, if you've ever played Final Fight, if you've ever played Streets of Rage, this game is going to be instantaneously recognizable. It's a very similar control scheme, a very similar movement tech, and a very similar just overall beat the ever-loving hell out of the person in front of you scheme. And that totally works if you like this genre. And this background with all those spotlights gives me a little bit of a Mega Man vibe as well. It's so unfortunate the PlayStation 1 didn't get more 2D games like this, because in Japan there was a ton, and there were some awesome beat 'em ups, and this one definitely is high up on the list for beat 'em ups on the PlayStation 1 as far as I'm concerned. From the boss battles to the overall weirdness, everything about this game is pure spectacle, and that gigantic sprite of the helicopter shooting off its turret guns on the left and right. This was a degree of 2D capability that you did not see on the Super Nintendo or the Sega Genesis, but it does look similar to those consoles, and I can understand in some ways why Sony executives in North America were hesitant to allow games like this to come over, because while you could tell it was more impressive than something Super Nintendo or Genesis could do, it wasn't that impressive compared to what 3D was at the time, because that was the first time we'd ever seen 3D in a home console space outside of the 3DO. As we move back to the whale level here, I love that the fight inside stops, and you get ejected from his blowhole, shot all the way to the back of the barnacle-encrusted whale, and slapped with the tail fin back onto his back so you can continue your beat-em-up escapade on the back of a whale. This is not stuff that happens in many beat-em-up games, and that's why I love this game so much. It's a super competent beat-em-up game with some awesome 2D graphics that has a ridiculous sense of humor that just 100% works as far as what I love to see in a game. It also has a really great soundtrack as well, so go ahead and listen for like 45 seconds and I'll come back and show you a ton more weirdness and a ton more awesome A-tier beat 'em up fun. But enjoy. Super awesome soundtrack, and I do love it, but if there's one thing I would strike the game for, it's that the boss battles aren't the most inspired things in the world. They're not gigantic sprites, and they're not too far off from the enemies you've been beating on your way up to the bosses. The other thing that I wish this game had a little bit more of was parallax scrolling, because you see here in the background, everything is basically scrolling at the same level of movement, and that water is not moving whatsoever. Definitely something PlayStation 1 could do, but I can forgive the game because this was a launch day title. People were not familiar with the hardware and they weren't used to working with it. So honestly, maybe this would come out a year later in the PlayStation 1's life cycle. You would have seen a lot more in the 2D department as far as special effects. But I love that you can totally just pick up a bazooka and destroy your enemies with it as well. There's so many different weapons in this game, and that walk animation with the bazooka does work really well and is super impressive. This is just the type of game I feel like a lot of you have never played it before. So leave me a comment down below and tell me who knew about it, whether or not you played it, and what your thoughts were, because I would be curious. It's a bummer that this never came out for the North American PlayStation 1 library, because I totally would have bought this day one along with some 3D stuff, because so many of us came from these genres. On the Super Nintendo, on the Sega Genesis, and arcades, beat 'em ups are basically one of the biggest genres back in the day. So as much fun as it was to get stuff in 3D, getting some 2D would have been a ton of fun as well, to see what the new 32-bit consoles could have done on the 2D front. But I will say I do love the graphical styling of this game. All of the colorful pastels here just work in the context of the universe, and of course it is a beat 'em up, so this isn't technically an elevator, but it's close enough to feel like an elevator level, which you always have to have in a beat 'em up for it to qualify as a true beat 'em up. You will see here when you die, every single life you get one special attack, and you definitely want to save that because this roller coaster can be very difficult, and if you use your special attack you can basically destroy all the enemies at once, and it seems like you have to beat so many enemies before the game will move you on, so you definitely want to be made aware of that. But I love that all of these guys here panic because they see that the roller coaster is going to crash into a mountainside, which then ends up putting us into a mountain lair with a lot of other tracks, lava, and enemies. I'm not sure if that was really an amusement park or if it was just an evil genius's lair. You're never quite sure what's going on in this game, but you always want to see what happens next. Every single level has a completely different graphical styling and a completely different enemy set for the most part. They're definitely going to recycle some people, but Freddy here definitely looks like a little bit like Rick with the terror mask from Splatterhouse in all the best ways possible. And stuff like this, these flame effects right here definitely were not anything you're going to be seeing on 16-bit consoles. The developers and artists did utilize the power of the PlayStation 1 where they could when this game came out. And there is a Sega Saturn version as well. I just played this originally on the PlayStation 1, and that's where I wanted to feature it for this playlist. But again, as we move on to the next boss, Hammer here, it's a fun design, a dude ripped with abs with these two metal fists and arms on him, but honestly it isn't just doing enough as far as the boss fight is concerned compared to some of the other beat 'em ups in this game. So I wish they had just pushed a little bit further on the overall boss aesthetic. I think that would have brought this game up maybe from the A- tier to the A tier in my opinion. But when a game is so much fun and so weird as this one is, I do have to look long and hard to find things that I don't love about it, and that's always the sign of a good game, when you're trying to pick apart at the seams to find something to say, this could have done better. And the soundtrack in this level is one of my favorites in the entire game, so just a quick 25 to 30 second sample right here, and I'll come back and tell you a little bit more about the history of this game and why I think it was a mistake for Sony to not release it in the West. But enjoy! That track is great, and I love that it is a little bit subdued, and I also love Osborne here, or the two Osborns as they were, with their googly eyes in their metal hoods. It kind of seems like two rejected members of Legion of Doom from WWF back in the day, if you remember them. And that's what this game really does. It just makes me think of the 90s. It's so 90s feeling from start to finish, and even though it's on a console that was primarily remembered in the West for being a 3D console that brought 3D to the masses, it is a 2D game on PlayStation 1, and it is a little look into what could have happened had Sony been not so resistant to bring more PlayStation 1 games from Japan over that utilize 2D. But if you've never played this game before, definitely give it a shot, and if you have, leave me your thoughts down below. I love hearing from you guys. I'll be back next week with more beat 'em ups, so we are done, and I will see you guys next time. Bye bye.